Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. I got to talk to the CEO of DEI Profounder, and he's a strategic HR leader driving DEI Solutions. He also coaches leaders on how to create, maintain, and lead psychologically safe teams. I'm talking about Juan Taveras, and we had a tremendous conversation on what exactly psychological safety is and why is that important and how can leaders create that on their teams. Also, what is true DEI? How do you get past just making sure that it's more than just some window dressing and some nice expressions? Juan gives some tremendous advice for all leaders out there today. You don't want to miss a second. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I have got a terrific leader today that is going to talk to you leaders from an HR perspective, but he is a leader in himself. So I'm going to introduce the CEO of DEI Profounder and strategic HR leader. He's driving DEI Solutions and helps coach leaders on how to create, maintain, and lead psychologically safe teams. Juan Taveras has joined me today. Juan, it is so great to have you on. How you doing, sir?
I am doing great, Kenny. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, awesome. The pleasure is so much mine. I want to find out first about your backstory because you have a passion and it comes through in anything I've heard you on or watched you and read some of your stuff. You have such a passion for this. What led you to that?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, so I like to make the connection between where I started my career. I went to school for hospitality management. And Kenny, I meant to tell you this earlier. I'm originally from New York. I lived on Long Island for a few years. So
we're connected with brothers. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I went to school in upstate New York, Syracuse, studied hospitality, went into the hospitality industry for a few years, but then pivoted to the nonprofit sector in around 2010. And I like to say that I bring everything that I learned in the hospitality industry about taking care of people, creating welcoming and inclusive environments into everything that I do in HR and how I coach and support leaders in doing the same for their teams. Because at the end of the day, just like in business, right, we want our customers to keep coming back. That's how we should be treating our team members and employees. It's how do we create spaces where they feel good, welcomed, and that keeps them wanting coming back.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. So the hospitality industry, that's also a lot of long hours, a lot of hard work.
Yes.
What were a couple of lessons that you picked up from there that helped you lead to what you're doing today?
Oh, good question. So let me think. I think there is this in the hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, even retail, there's a big focus on the customer, right? And customer's always right, and trying to do everything we can to keep that customer and keep them happy, keep them speaking in positive terms about us and our business. But one of the lessons that I learned through that, and not to say that that's inaccurate, I completely believe that is true, but there needs to be a balance between how much we take care of our customers and how much we take, like our internal customers, our employees, like they also need to be a priority. And there's a lot more talk now, and over the last several years around, if you take care of your people, then they will take care of your customers even better, right? So there's this connection, right? That is evident in how the way that you treat your people. They will. That is how they will treat your customers. So I want to flip that a little bit. It's like we should all be customer centric because we're trying to run a business at the end of the day and keeping it profitable. And the way to do that is to be hyper focused about your people and who you're attracting, how you're retaining them, and what you're doing to develop them and keep them engaged.
Absolutely. 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 So some good early lessons for you. Um, let's dive into diversity, equity, and inclusion for a few minutes. I hate to say this. There's a lot of companies where it's almost like window dressing, that they say that. But Juan, what are some things, because your company does such a great job in really showing how you can truly be diverse and equitable and include, right? So where do some leaders start to really truly live and breathe DE&I?
Yeah, great question. So here's what I like to say, especially I have a number of clients that are just getting started in this work, believe it or not, right? It's 2023 and folks are just now sort of poking their heads up and saying, oh, I should pay attention to this. And here's what I like to think about, or help folks think about, is let's unpack the motive, right? Like, so you're suddenly interested in this. Let's understand why. Is it because you read an article, you're seeing the headlines and you don't want to get left behind, or is it because you have a true desire to create a workspace where everyone feels included? And I mean everyone, because here's the other thing, a challenge that I come across with the DEI work is that a lot of people think that DEI is about hiring more people of color or being more LGBTQ plus friendly. And of course, that is part of the work, but it's not all of the work. It's really, you have to start with where you're at. So if you have an organization where you might not even know about the identities of your employees, then start there. Let's start with connecting with the people that are currently working with you, and ensuring that they have what they need to be successful, to feel valued, and to be able to contribute in a meaningful way. So a lot of my leadership coaching work really starts with understanding your own values, your own fears and beliefs around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And all of that is stemmed from our own lived experience, right? Because whatever your race is, we've been conditioned, right? In one way, shape, or form, throughout our lifetime, to believe what we believe today. So, and when I use the word condition intentionally, because it's now in our subconscious, right? So we're not really aware of it, and that's where biases come from, and all the things, stereotypes. So unpacking that with leaders, I like to take set aside your business goals for a moment. Let's really hone in on your personal motive around this, your experiences, your beliefs, and then see how that is showing up every day with your team and in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of that makes so much sense. And I love that you said you start with looking at the leaders first. And so what are some things that you've come across, Juan, that has been very difficult for leaders to get past and to embrace true diversity, true equity, true inclusion? What's some of the barriers that you've seen out there today?
Yeah, so a couple of things come to mind immediately. Starting with yourself, that work takes time. So one challenge is business leaders want results. They want to implement a program and they want to see change next week, next month, right? Or they want this to impact the bottom line in some way because they're investing time and resources. And that's just not how this works. And this is what you mentioned earlier, that we're now seeing, a lot of the window dressing on a lot of organizations. If you do the work in that way, which is performative, you're just kind of checking, putting up some a statement on your website or changing your logo or whatever it is that you're doing. But if you're not actually doing the work internally, and which includes internally yourself too, right? Then you're not going to see the results. And that's what we're unfortunately, what we're seeing now is a lot of companies completely taking all that back, eliminating DEI positions and teams, and removing all of that from the budget because they didn't see results, or because they have the perception that work either didn't work or caused more harm. But the reality is that it just wasn't done right from the beginning, right? So that's one of the challenges. And the second thing is, and this is also sort of a mindset that is, I from my perspective has been shifting slowly over the years, is this idea that the workplace is a place of business. So we come here to do a job, you do what you're paid to do and then you go home. But that's not the case anymore, right? That might have been the mindset a decade or two ago, but now the new generations that are in the workforce want to be connected to the work. They want to do work that is important to them and connected to their values, and that is making the world a better place. This is what we know about Gen Z. So you can't ignore that. If you're not, as a leader, if you're not making those shifts intentionally, then you're not going to retain folks, or you're not going to get the talent that you need in the door to begin with.
Yeah. I could see that as a barrier for even veteran leaders as well. Yeah. I want to go back to, you mentioned results, and what are some tangible results, right? Let's say I'm doing all the right things. Theoretically, what should I see in 6 months, or what are some where I can go back now to? Because that's sad that some companies are just, okay, we're taking it off our website. Yep. We're cutting our whole DE&I team. But what results are we actually looking for?
Yeah, good question. So I like to focus on internal results, right? When you think, an analogy I like to use with leaders is initiating diversity, equity, and inclusion work, or belonging work, whatever you want to call it. You're cultivating a garden, right? And you start with planting seeds. So if you take care of the garden, then it will eventually lead to flowers, trees. Maybe those trees give you fruit or vegetables, whatever it is that you're planting, right? But that takes time. But you can see the progress. What the challenge, though, that I've come across is that leaders expect to see that progress without doing the cultivating, without doing the actual work, right? So it starts on the inside. So to answer your question, in 6 months, if you're doing DEI programming and you're doing it well, and by that I mean that it's an inclusive process to begin with. It's not a top-down program. It's not an external consultant coming in for a day, doing a training, and then you expect results. It's about daily intentional practices, and then embracing the DEI as an organization. Then you start to see engagement shifts, right? And I think most organizations today now are doing engagement surveys pretty regularly. So seeing shifts in those results, right? How engaged people are. One of the metrics I like to use is the NPS, Net Promoter Score. I think it's a very powerful tool. When you ask your staff members, how likely are you to recommend us as an employer to a friend or family member? Because that is it says so much when somebody can say, yes, I would love my friends or family to work here with me because I like it so much. I want everybody else to have this experience. But if that score is low, then you know that something's off. Folks are sticking around because they have to, or they might need the paycheck, or they don't have any other options. But if they're not willing to recommend your place as a place of work, then something's missing there, right? So, but that's all internal, right? You have to focus on those internal results first and those shifts, so that the external stuff comes later. And by that I mean you're attracting a more diverse candidate pool. You have metrics now that you can share publicly, right, and put on your website, because that's one thing that leaders want. They want to see the data behind their DEI initiatives. And at first, that data might be not great. It doesn't look good, or it's embarrassing. So you don't want to go public with it. But you can't rush to make those changes externally until you focus on the internal aspects first.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
It makes so much sense. And I love that you keep coming back to really focusing on us internally, because I think that is so vital. And I think, even you talked about, posting some statistics. If your turnover has gone down even just a tick, right? That's a big deal. Especially in the spaces like retail and restaurants and hospitality. I wanted to ask now a little bit more. I want to come back to interviewing in a few, but I want to ask about psychological safety. I love that you talk about that. Let the audience know what that actually is, and then how as a leader, how can I get to that place with my team?
Love it. Yes. So psychological safety, it's become a bit of a buzzword in recently. There's a lot of talk about what it is, right? It's a place or a state, right, in your workplace where people can feel comfortable to be their full authentic selves. And what that means is asking questions, even when the questions might be silly or naive or whatever. It's just like I feel comfortable asking whatever's on my mind because I know that I'm in a safe space. I feel comfortable challenging the status quo, right? So it's like if I see something that I don't think is right, or I notice that we're doing something because that's just the way that we've always been doing it, I feel comfortable saying that and raising my hand and potentially challenging an idea, especially at different levels, right? So if I feel comfortable managing up and having a dialogue with my leader about a difference. Conflict is resolved, right? There is conflict isn't averted, it's leaned into. So when there's a disagreement, if there is psychological safety in place, there's people feel more comfortable and confident in leaning into that and saying, okay, hold on, there's a disagreement here, let's unpack this, right? There's this environment of learning, growth mindset, of mutual respect, and the valuing of that difference, right? So it avoids things like groupthink and or silence, which is the other, more dangerous one, where people are just not engaging and keeping things to themselves, which could lead to issues later on. So it's very clear, right? And Amy, I'm gonna reference Amy Edmondson, who wrote a book. She's a professor at Harvard, and her book, The Fearless Organization, has obviously a lot of research on this topic. And then Tim Clark, wrote a book on the 4 levels of psychological safety, and so wonderful resources to read. But one of the things that I do in my practice, and by the way, my wife is a clinical psychologist, so I lean on her heavily for
wow,
some
get
of
a
this,
resource, man.
absolutely, yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
we work together with some of our clients on developing psychological safety for their teams, because this stemmed out of our DEI work. So we were noticing, again, doing some of this work, you never know what to expect or which way things are going to go, even if you have a plan or a strategy. But we came across this issue where a number of teams and organizations were doing the work, they were really engaged, but the results were not there. So it's like, okay, what's going on? So we dug a little deeper, and the psychological safety was to make this story short, psychological safety was the theme sort of that came across, is that folks did not feel safe. They didn't feel like they could speak up. They felt like the DI work was happening to them, was top down and something that was required or mandatory that they just had to get through, as opposed to it being a conversation and a process that everybody was involved in. So now in our practice, and this was an evolution in our work too, we lead with psych safety. So now when somebody approaches me with, hey, Juan, we need help with a DEI strategy, I was like, okay, let's talk about psych safety first. Let's make sure that we have, because that's the foundational piece, right, that needs to be in place in order for those heavy and deep and personal conversations to be fruitful and successful. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that is so awesome, and thank you so much for defining it and giving us a really good visual of what that looks and feels like. And I'm imagining, I'll use a New York City analogy, getting on the train and looking forward to coming to work, knowing that, you're going to be validated and you're going to feel like, hey, I can speak up. And boy, that's been bothering me the last few days. Why are we doing that process like that? I'm going to go and first thing is tell Kenny, hey, can we change this? On that vein, here's what I hear a lot of leaders say, especially in this space, Juan, is that they don't know quite the line. They want to make that connection with their employees, but then the employee may be talking about some things happening in their personal life, and they're like, oh, wait, I don't know if I should, be hearing this.
Yeah.
What do you advise on that? And where employers and managers and leaders can draw a line, yet still have that great connection with their employees?
I love that question. Yeah, and it is a real challenge that many leaders that I'm coaching now are facing. And so 2 things. I encourage leaders to again tap into their personal values, right, and center themselves in this space where they feel confident and comfortable, and remember what their purpose and mission is, right? So that when they are engaging with an individual that is sharing a lot about their personal life, it doesn't feel like a threat, or it doesn't feel like like taboo, right? Like this area that I can't go into.
Mhm.
But being centered on your values then helps you know your boundaries, right? Because and this is going to be different for every leader. There are some folks that are just comfortable having those conversations, like, yes, tell me, let's talk about your divorce. I want to hear about this. I went through a divorce too. Maybe I can help you. And you take on that sort of coaching mentor role for that individual. That could be helpful. But if you haven't had the lived experience, or maybe that experience is triggering for you and you don't feel comfortable going there with them, then you have to be able to set that boundary, and doing that in a way that is in what's the word, it not to reject
Yes.
the other person, right? Not to, you have to validate their experience, and then also be honest about your capacity to engage with them in that space. So when you hit that boundary or that wall, then the conversation has to shift, and you have to say, I hear you, I see you, and I cannot help you, right? But here are some resources. You can go talk to HR. We have an EAP program. There are some benefits. Or if you know of someone else in the organization that they might benefit talking to, but making it, not closing down that conversation. That's what is most important. You're obviously removing yourself from it because it's a boundary now. But you're not pushing that person away. You're saying, you're acknowledging that you cannot help them, but you're opening the door to other possibilities, so that this person isn't just left hanging, right? That is like, oh gosh, okay, so my leader can't help me, and now what? Yeah.
I love that. And I love that you said, if you're not shutting it down, you just lean on your own values and your own experience. And I can remember as a kid, Juan, having, leaders, managers, I knew nothing about their personal life, because they would always say, my personal life is personal, my work
Right.
life is this. And times have shifted so much. That's great advice. I want to go back now and ask you a little bit and get some advice on interviewing these days.
Mm-hmm.
I used to I would do a second interview for my store managers, and they said, Kenny, I know you like that person because they're just like me, right? Like, yeah, they are just like you. I don't know that that's a good thing. Not that, I want to see you, mix it up a little bit. Why do you want to, surround yourself with many me's?
Yeah.
What are some hints and tips these days to avoid that? Because then I think inclusion and diversity, when you're hiring people just like you, is dead. What are some
100%.
hints and tips at the interview process that you can give that helps leaders really at that point look to really have some true diversity, equity, and inclusion on their teams?
Absolutely. And first I'll say that hiring yourself is 100% normal. Like this, we are attracted to sameness, right? Like, hey, you look and sound like me, or you went to the same school that I went to. So there's an affinity is created there.
Yeah.
So that's totally normal. I want to normalize that it isn't nine times out of 10, it is not an intentional process. So, which is why what we do is support leaders with creating intentional bias blockers, is what we call them. So, because bias is, we all have them. If you have a brain, you have bias.
Right.
And it's important for us to be aware of our biases and then be very intentional with how to block them, right? So in an interview process, first thing I would say is hire by panel. So don't have any one individual making all the hiring decisions. You come together as a group, so that also now has multiple minds in the decision-making process. So you're less likely to hire your mini me, but now you might hire somebody that looks like 3 people and comes, but brings a lot of other identities and diversity into the space. I would also say focusing the interview process and questions and whatever you do during whether it's questions or job related exercises, whatever it is that you do, it should be connected to the job. So avoid any interviews where you're just talking for 30 minutes, right? I've seen this happen. Leaders are like, oh, I get a really good sense about people if I just talk to them for 20 minutes. It's like, yeah, those are your biases at play, right? You're going to get a sense that you like them or not, right? Because of something they said or how you're feeling around them. But can they do the job, right? At the end of the day, you want to hire people that are going to add value to your organization in this particular role. So what exactly, being very clear about what you're looking for, and then measuring that along the way intentionally. And then the last piece I would say is when you, and this is sort of a this can backfire. So I'm gonna own that and say, but using your current staff to recruit for talent,
Yes.
is also a great place to start if you're having a hard time finding just different diverse candidates. And be mindful of that usually of hiring people that look like other people in your company, right? So that's the only caveat I would add to that. But it's a great way to start with just getting a sense of what type of candidate is out there, and then putting them through your process.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And I love knowing those biases first before you even, sit down. And I love that you kind of release that, because most of the time I would let my leaders, okay, but they look like they can do the job, so I'm going to let this one slide, in terms of the many me's. Um, so it's not always a bad thing. You've laid out a wonderful blueprint. I want to ask, what are some of your advice now for maintaining, 6
Yeah.
months, a year down the road? How do I keep this at the top of my mind, at the top of, and have this as the same type of goals as my financial goals every single month in and month out? How do I maintain this?
I'm so glad you asked, because the maintenance piece is key. You can do a number of things, right? Like when folks start working with me and my wife, we implement programming, we do some training, and we'll work with somebody for 3 to 6 months, and we'll start to see results. But then you have to keep doing that. Those results aren't just going to multiply. You have to continue to do what the showing up every day and having that intentionality. So I would say the first thing, and I'm glad you brought up financial results, right? Because that is top of mind for business owners. We're always looking at the bottom line. We're looking at our balance, our P&L every day. So you should do the same thing with your engagement, right? With your staff members. So you've created an intentional program to build and create psychological safety on your team. Now keep that going, right? Keep measuring it. Engage your staff in what's working, what's not working, what else would they like to see, how else can we improve our culture, and involve them in that process. So it has to become like a daily commitment and a daily practice, because the moment you stop doing it, again, I go back to tending that garden. If you stop taking care of that garden, those plants are not going to make it. So it has to be daily, it has to be intentional, it has to be at the forefront. And I would say, as leaders, we also need to talk about it more. So there's this something that I do in my coaching, is reminding leaders that leadership does not mean that you have all the answers. Leadership doesn't mean that you know what you're doing all the time, right? So being open about that, and that also in that process, you're creating safety, because it humanizes you, right, to your team members. You're saying, oh yeah, my leader isn't perfect, neither am I, but we're all working together, and we all are sort of contributing to the same goal, and we're learning and growing as we go. So being really, really intentional about that every day, really. So every time you have a check-in with like a one-on-one with a staff member, you go through your agenda, you've got work stuff to discuss, but then ask, hey, how are you doing? How do you feel psychologically safe? Just ask straight up, like, how do you feel? What can I do to make you feel more valued and more engaged and more included? And that goes a long way.
Absolutely. Juan, this has been amazing. I could probably talk to you for the rest of the day nonstop. And we'd be like, hey, are we going to go to the bathroom or something? Get a cup of coffee? This has really been amazing. God bless the work that you're doing. It is so important. And I love that you are really trying hard to keep this at the top of leaders' minds, and it should be right up there. And you're trying to get rid of that whole window dressing thing that I think a lot of companies are doing. So my last question for you is, how can people connect and work with you?
Oh, awesome. Yes. So LinkedIn is my the place where I do all my business.
Okay.
So look me up on LinkedIn. It's Juan Taveras, and then I've got MBA SPHR on after my name. So, and you'll see my picture probably. But I also have, so our website is DEIProfinder.com. And that's where that's our main business, where we are connecting HR leaders to other DEI resources, and that's a big part of the work that we do with companies. But you can also email me at Juan, JUAN, at DEIProfinder.com.
Gotcha. Okay. And that will, for all our folks that are driving and listening to this, That'll all be in the show notes. So,
Beautiful.
Juan, I hope people take you up on connecting with you. You're doing amazing work, and you really have your finger on the pulse of what leaders really need today to be successful in this space. So thank you for all the work you're doing, and please continue to do it.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Pleasure to be on your show.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to leave it there, folks. This has been Kenny and Juan. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast, New York edition. No, I'm just kidding. We'll talk to you real soon.